Okay, we're at the hour here, so sure people are going to keep coming in, but let's just start. And first, I want to thank you all for being here. It means so much. We had over 450 registrants for this webinar, which I'm just blown away by that. But I think I know the reason why, and it's because marketers only think about one thing, and it's disgusting. And that is Performance Max. Performance Max is just such a dominant topic over the last 18 months longer now. And I get it. You know, there are brands in here, there are retailers in here, there are agencies in here, and freelancers and all kinds of people. And Performance Max is this strange, interesting black box kind of a thing where we want to know what's going on. Why is it the way it is? Is there something to know about Performance Max? So I think so, and I'm going to talk about a lot of those things today. Let me just, introduce you to the agenda here for today, what we're going to talk about. I don't like rehearse these things in front of the mirror before. I don't know exactly how long this is going to take. Bear with me, okay? And let me just say, feel free to use that Q&A and ask questions. I'm not going to answer them as we go, but at the end, I can stay until the end of the hour, and I'd like to just answer a lot of questions. If there are some, I hope there are. So don't be shy about asking questions. On the agenda, this is a webinar after all, so we're going to start with an About Us section, about me and about smarter e-commerce. And then we won't waste a lot of time on that. Then we'll get into really the meat of this, like what can we generally learn in a general sense about Performance Max? And then it has that word performance in the name of the campaign type. So we'll certainly be talking about the performance characteristics of this campaign type. Then we're going to get into some tactics and testing recommendations, and there'll be time, as I mentioned, for your questions. So I don't want to spend too much longer than that. About us, well, hey, that's me. My name is Mike, and wow, I spend a lot of time thinking about Performance Max these days. And I think that'll show. But I just want to say it's such a great community, and I really appreciate that you're all here. And yeah, if you want to find me online, you can find me with the handle Mike Ryan Retail. There's a lot of people out there named Mike Ryan. So, but you'll find me that way. And a little bit about smarter e-commerce. You know, I say this often. I'm so lucky because I don't know, I'm just some guy, and I'm standing on the shoulders of like over 100 incredible teammates and tons of clients. And, you know, we benefit from their brain power too. We benefit from like the aggregated data, which I'm going to show you a bit of today. And it's just all a big team effort. And smarter e-commerce has, well, I have a pretty good overview of the market, and I feel pretty confident saying that smarter e-commerce has some of the smartest people out there in terms of not just Performance Max, but Google Ads, PPC more broadly. You won't find better practitioners and better software developers, and it's a great company, and check us out if you're interested. Also, quick shout out, this was not intentional, I had no idea, but today is Google's 25th birthday. Happy birthday, Google. You're now old enough to legally rent a car in the US. Pretty cool. And yeah, let's get into the content here and talk about some of the general characteristics of Performance Max. This is like, I guess I would consider this a more advanced webinar. We're not going to talk about like what is an asset group or something like that. And it's okay if you're not that familiar with that, but I think there's a lot of great resources out there. We can find that out. I do want to quickly ask the question, what is Performance Max, or answer that question. And the way that Google defines this, my favorite definition from Google's side comes from their API. They describe it as a unified buying service to all of Google Ads inventory. And that really is what makes Performance Max different from campaign types before. It's that unification of ad inventory. And the kind of the premise, the promise of Performance Max is that it will use this artificial intelligence to reach customers with the right ad inventory at the right moment. That's kind of the idea. Now, the way that I think about it is like Kirby, basically. If anyone remembers Kirby, hopefully there's no Gen Z or whoever in here wondering what that thing is. But yeah, so Performance Max is this strange kind of animal. Like I've described it here as like the ads platform incubating inside the old ads platform. Like I really view it that way. I think it's bigger than a campaign type. I think it's more ambitious than a campaign type because its goal is actually to absorb and replace other kinds of campaign types. You see that with the little checklist here: smart shopping, local, display, dynamic search, discover. And not all of these are required or mandatory upgrades. In some cases, you can choose. But the point is that Performance Max aims to cover the full funnel and sort of literally cannibalize these things. Not in like that way we typically think about cannibalization, but like really, it wants to bring all of these other standard campaign types into it. And I think that one day all that will be left will be like these leftovers of that. The way we have an appendix or a tailbone, there'll be these leftover pieces. When we're looking at the current state of the market for Performance Max, this chart's actually a couple months old, but it's an important chart. I include it because we actually now have over 3,000. We have access to this. The title of this chart is a little misleading. Apologies for that. I wrote under management, but it's a little more complicated than that. But we have access to over 3,000 Performance Max campaigns, which is the databases for a lot of what's coming next. And a couple things you can see just from what happened within our largest MCC. You see that there was this huge spike last year in July, just over a year ago. And that was as, this auto upgrade tool came into place. And Google had really laid the groundwork here by driving massive adoption of smart shopping already. And then they were able to just kind of migrate that existing base into this new campaign type. Things flattened out in Q4 of last year, but it's going on steady since. We just see that going up and up. If we look at it a different way, if we would compare the cost share of standard shopping, smart shopping, Performance Max, you can see that hockey stick that happened with adoption of PMax. And that wouldn't have been possible without that groundwork with this black line. You see that long groundwork of smart shopping adoption that already happened. So PMax was really able to pick up where smart shopping left off. Now, the thing with such a huge, fast hockey stick, exponential adoption like that, I just want to zoom into an anecdote here. One advertiser, this is their cost share over a period of a year. And you can see that it took them a year to fully migrate from standard shopping to Performance Max. And I know there's actually some Google people in here, but I hope that clicks with you. This is like, it's not just flipping a switch for a lot of advertisers. There's a lot of uncertainty about Performance Max. There's a lot of uncertainty about when you're spending $3 million about reallocating that investment when 50% of your traffic depends on that. And so people have taken their time with it in some cases, and I think that's reasonable. But now I want to get into some fun benchmarks, let's call them. A couple things. So there's a lot of data dump in this presentation. I'm just gonna let you know it's like that. And I hesitate to, like, I don't want you to walk out and interpret these things in like as a single source of truth, or, oh, well, we saw this number presented and it's that. This is our sample of the market, right? It's a decent size sample, but it's a limited and imperfect sample. And I like to think in terms of like central tendency, but sometimes that's not adequate, and that'll become important later on. So, I like to look at like, what is a range of outcomes? Where's like the middle 50% of the data, not just the average or the median, but what's the normal range of data points that we might see? And I've shared this metaphor recently on a podcast episode. I like it. There's this old story that we learned in school when I was growing up. about an elephant and these blind men who have never experienced an elephant before. And each one of them is having this radically different experience of the elephant than the other. One's touching the side of the elephant, thinks it's like a wall, and another's touching the trunk and thinks it's a big snake. And the problem is that they're not talking to each other. And it's like that with PMax. We can only take kind of snapshots or specific perspectives of this strange black box campaign type. But if we let those data points talk to each other, we can try to make sense of this thing, and be a little smarter than, the moral of the story with those guys is they didn't talk to each other and they all disagreed. But so I think there's different ways we can view Performance Max. Something that I felt really strongly about at the start when PMax started rolling out, which I feel differently about now, is that this is way more than just shopping. And I've been a bit surprised, and I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but ultimately, shopping is still by far the most important inventory in an e-commerce Performance Max campaign. And in fact, we see, I said earlier that I'll mention ranges, we see that a cost share of shopping is typically sitting between 78 and 96%, and 89% on average. Now, I just want to mention that that includes dynamic remarketing. It is not only shopping, and that's something that I see often getting glossed over. But yeah, it is still, it's really, shopping is core to what it is. So I think it's important to remember that. And it becomes important, like, why are products so important? Why is your feed so important? It's because this is still a product listing channel, by and large. So GO Max, is that what PMax is? GO is Google owned and operated. And it's that kind of like most special part of the inventory soup in there, the ad inventory, where there's like, Gmail is in there, search is in there, it's where YouTube is in there, and it's not specifically reported by Google. They'll tell you impressions that go to that bucket, GO, but they're not going to tell you about clicks there or costs. And they're not going to tell you what is the YouTube share of GO. It's very much a black box, for better or worse. Most people are not a fan of that, and there's some very popular scripts to help tackle that. But an important thing, as of today, by the way, September 27th, for people, 2023, for people watching this in the future, is that you can no longer exclude Gmail, for example. And it seems a little risky to me for Google to take an action like that. It could be construed as kind of like self-dealing, because they're, you can put in other kinds of exclusions, but you can't exclude the Google placements. But at any rate, it's their call. So let's talk about device share. I think you could call, in a sense, Performance Max Mobile Max. Google some years ago said that they were going to be a mobile first company, and they said that when that really meant something. The mobile market was new and growing, and they really stepped into it, and they were totally right. Mobile is very important to e-commerce, and to advertising. And when we compare Performance Max to shopping, we see that that mobile share is even higher. It's really something, and it comes at the expense of desktop. So that's based on 27 billion impressions. And the other thing that I note here is about the TV inventory. Like, that's a new placement type, or device type. And so far, according to the reported data, nothing's really happening there. But I don't think that that's going to stay that way. I think it's one of the higher potential inventory placements for Google. I think right now it's kind of the domain of different kinds of, programmatic, connected TV, ad tech, this, that, the other thing. But I think it's an area for PMax to grow in the future. Brand Max. Is PMax Brand Max? While there are some new controls in place, which I think is wonderful of Google, there's also some extra reporting, which helps us understand this topic more. But initially, Performance Max received a lot of criticism for being heavy on brand traffic. At first, it was just a suspicion. It turned out to be a correct suspicion. And there were no campaign level negative keywords available, or there were these very kind of hidden and manual workarounds for that. But now there are brand exclusions. And so this problem is becoming more tackled these days. And we're going to talk about it a bit more later on when we talk about tactics. But for example, looking at the search term insights report, this is anecdotal because I only look at a handful of specific advertisers here. But I didn't cherry pick these, only insofar as it was possible to do this analysis for them. But we see numbers like 43% branded share of revenue, 27% branded share of revenue, 49%, 61%. That's a lot. And you can understand why that would be problematic for some people. Personally, I think because, by the way, if you're scratching your head about that, it's because, brand traffic is typically going to perform at a much higher efficiency level. The question comes up if it's incremental. The question comes up if it shouldn't be isolated so that you can budget it separately, etc. But as I read, strategic hornet's nest. People dispute this. Is PMax attribution max? There's a lot of people who feel that PMax might over attribute itself or insert itself somehow into conversion funnels in order to make itself look better. And again, this is anecdotal, but I had a look at one account where I was pretty surprised to see, with data-driven attribution, you get these fractional conversions. And on the lower end, you've got conversions as small as 0.01% or 1% of a conversion basically. And all these little tiny fractional conversions in this account added up to almost 20% of their revenue, which is a lot. And you could interpret this as PMax kind of overreaching or just kind of like, kissing, just touching the conversion funnel so that it can get attributed in there. It's a tricky topic. You have to do incrementality testing to really know. And the other thing there is that, the cost share is only 12%, and so you see that the revenue share is pretty strong relative to the cost share. So not only is it supporting a large revenue share in this account, but it's also boosting performance as well, because this portion of conversions are performing well. So it's an interesting question to me. Or is Performance Max, after all, Performance Max? Because when I look at the performance of PMax, it looks good. It does. This chart here, you can see there's basically this is the share of campaigns that are below target or above target or on target, and like half of them are on target, and a third of them are above target. It's a pretty small amount that are below target. So that's promising, right? We're going to talk about it in more detail. Now we're going to get into performance characteristics. And a reminder, if you have questions or anything, shoot them in the Q&A, and we'll look at them at the end. So before we get into that ROAS topic a little further, first, let's have a look at how people are bidding to understand what are people asking of PMax? What do people want from PMax, considering the options that are available? So in the big left-hand donut chart there, you see that, again, these are e-commerce campaigns, so this is pretty logical, but 95% of campaigns are using a maximized conversion value strategy instead of maximized conversions. I'm sure those max conversions ones are more popular in lead gen or whatever the case might be. And then of those maximized conversion value ones, we see that the vast majority of those have a ROAS target in place, an efficiency target in place. And so if you look at the bullet points there, you can see that ultimately this translates into about an 80% share of campaigns that are effectively on target ROAS bidding. Of course, it's not its own dedicated strategy anymore. It's a sub-strategy of max conversion value, but about 8 in 10 campaigns that we see are bidding that way. And so that's why, because if you know me, you know I'm not a huge fan of ROAS as a KPI. And I wouldn't ordinarily give it this much attention as I'm going to today, but I have to follow the numbers. I have to follow the data. 8 out of 10 campaigns are optimizing for return on ad spend. So let's talk about it. It's good to maximize performance, right? I mean, here are 2 different ways of looking at that chart from a couple slides ago. Remember this one? We see that a lot of them are above target and some are below target. And those, it has these branded colors, our corporate branded colors. Let's switch it to like data science colors, right? And there's 2 ways of looking at this. In the left-hand chart, these on-target campaigns are neutral. And then it's bad when campaigns are below target. And you see that in red. And it's good when campaigns are above the target ROAS. So that's in green. But another way of looking at this would be to say that, you know, this is supposed to deliver on target. And because the case would be, for that view, would be that if it's below target, then yeah, it's missing the efficiency level. It's not profitable enough. And if it's above target, then it's probably missing some revenue and leaving money on the table. And so, you know, that's one way of viewing it. I actually tend to view it a bit that way personally. I think that having as high a possible share of on target is a good thing. But there are reasons why it might be that way. But I want to quickly get into a side note about standard shopping. I know some of you are saying, what about standard shopping? How does it stack up? So I had a look, and this is standard shopping with target ROAS in place with smart bidding, because that's the only way you can make a vaguely apples to apples comparison here. And yeah, we see that standard shopping has a higher on target share than Performance Max, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. And here you see a time series. And this is interesting, though. You can see with the dotted lines, these are the ROAS targets that people are setting over time. It's the median value. And then the solid lines are the actual achieved ROAS. And people are typically setting higher targets for Performance Max than for standard shopping. Not that different, and Performance Max is overperforming or overachieving those by a wider margin. And there's a whole other part of this, which is that it is a max conversion value strategy. I can't tell you if revenue targets are being met because that's uncapped. No one knows that. They'll, you know, an advertiser will have their own private revenue targets, and they'll know if that target was met or not. But I can't benchmark that or show that in any kind of aggregated way. And I think that PMax is doing a better job, though, there at delivering revenue. That's what I'm hearing. It's delivering volume, and it's still nailing the efficiency. So at face value, by the in-platform metrics, you know, this always needs to be compared against the back end, and then we can get into all kinds of arguments about incrementality. But according to the in-platform numbers, PMax works pretty well, and arguably a little better than standard shopping. There are limitations, though. Here is that same chart. I took away shopping, so it's not cluttered. But you see the target ROAS with the dotted line for PMax, and the actual ROAS is that solid line. And here we're looking at a special segment. We're looking at campaigns with 30 or less conversions per month. And you see that it's struggling. The actual ROAS is sat well below the target ROAS. Oops, I think I forgot to update the bullet points on that slide. Please excuse me. I'll never forgive myself. But it raises the question, well, how much data does it take? If PMax is struggling on low volume campaigns, how much data does it take? So I tried to have a look at that because I see all kinds of recommendations out there. Google says as few as 15 conversions per month, and that might be right for some accounts, as few as, but mostly it's going to need more than that. And so these are, again, those same buckets. I use them a lot in this presentation of below target, on target, above target. And we see how this plays out with different amounts of monthly conversions. So as you proceed along the horizontal axis with more conversions, you'll see that that on target segment expands. And you'll see that the below target decreases. And what's really interesting is that there's a certain amount of campaigns that are just always above target. But I find this to be pretty interesting, actually. And I think it just demonstrates what we all know intuitively. More data is better for the algorithm. So I do recommend, ideally, you're going to aim for 60 or more conversions, but it's not a hard and fast rule. You have to look at your account. You have to test it. And when you segment, do it with purpose. You know, look for meaningful difference. Every time you segment, it has to answer a question, why? Because otherwise you might be over segmenting and splitting your data. It's about risk tolerance. So if that segment has a purpose for you and it's worth a little risk on how slippery the actual ROAS is going to be, if it's worth it for you, go for it. So let's get into some kind of tactical review and testing review. PMax builds are getting more complex. What this shows is April 2022 against April 2023 in the purple there, or blue, or whatever color. And, you know, we see that in 2022, almost 2/3 of accounts had just a single campaign running. And naturally, that was during the adoption phase. Anyway, people were still testing this. But now, a year later, 3 out of 4 accounts are running greater than 2 campaigns, and the median is 3. So we see that people are segmenting more. And another way that there's complexity are these tactics like feed only versus full build. Feed only, of course, you are, you know, restricting the assets that PMax has to work with. You're restricting the URL settings to try to force it to operate in this like smart shopping kind of way, to be kind of like the technology that preceded it, and to leave out that Google owned and operated bucket, leave out that display and app bucket, you know, more, and focus on that classic shopping inventory even more, and dynamic remarketing. So we see that about 8 out of 10 campaigns are full build. And I don't know, you know, you get the feeling when you read articles online, if you're on Twitter or LinkedIn, all kinds of discussion about feed only. But you have to remember, like, all of us people on LinkedIn, probably most of the people in this webinar, like, we're nerds, which is a good thing, but we're nerds, okay? And most advertisers not doing that. I think what's even more interesting is this chart on the right-hand side. Sorry for all the donut charts, by the way, but I know not everyone's a fan of pie charts. I like donut charts pretty well, though. But, you know, you see the feed only still holding strong at 16.7%. What I've done here is to segment single asset group full build campaigns and multiple asset groups, okay? And what we see is that there's an awful lot of single asset group campaigns out there. So not only are there a lot of full build campaigns, but there's a lot of single asset group campaigns out there too, which is kind of maybe problematic, because we'll talk about the performance in a second. But when we look at the multiple asset groups, you might be wondering, you know, what's the optimal amount of asset groups? Well, I can't tell you that. I had a look, I tried to find that out, and the performance was like, there was no clear trend. There was not a trend that like more asset groups is necessarily better. But again, if we want to talk about an interquartile range, the median 50% of advertisers have like between 3 and 7 asset groups when they're using full build and when they have multiple asset groups. This is an interesting slide. Now, I have called feed only PMax for people who hate PMax, and I am on principle opposed to feed only campaigns. I think if you hate PMax that much, just use standard shopping with smart bidding. It's still there. But you know what? I was wrong. I had a look at feed only versus full build campaigns, and feed only is doing a better job at being on target to performance. And that comes at the expense of below target. So it looks pretty good. And by the way, I applied a filter here as noted in the bullet points. These are only looking at campaigns with more than 60 campaigns, 60 conversions monthly. And so, you know, these campaigns had a fighting chance. They have enough data to deliver. And feed only did better. There's another point I want to mention here, because I was talking about central tendency. Like I like to look at average or median and get a feeling, but sometimes that can be very misleading, because sometimes there's more than one central tendency in a data set. Sometimes there are importantly different populations in a data set. That's why you would segment, by the way. And when I look at multi-asset group, sorry, I've written it here as multi-AG, please excuse me, but multi-asset group PMax campaigns compared to single asset group PMax campaigns, there's an important difference. So first off, the multi-asset group campaigns are performing more comparably to feed only. It's not such a big difference. And it's really the single asset group PMax campaigns that are dragging down full build campaigns as a population. And the big difference there, you see it standing out in green, I hope you see it, is average order value. So compared to feed only, full build campaigns have higher CPCs. They suffer on CPC, although a high CPC can be a good thing. They suffer on conversion rate. But this is important. Those full build multi-asset group campaigns appear to do better on average order value than your feed only campaign. So if that's important to you, think about it. And this is not causation. It's not like, oh, I took my single asset group PMax campaign and I made 5, and now it's magically going to be better. Not what I want to say. There's probably some other factors in here, you know, like the people, the campaigns, the advertisers that are building out more asset groups is because they have more better assets, because they have valuable audience signals, this kind of thing. So just that I said it. And yeah, let's get into some more tactics here. We're like, okay, just over half hour in. Okay. So feed only approach. That's no assets, no URL expansion. We've just been talking about it a bit. It does minimize that black box of Google owned and operated that you might find problematic. You benefit from strong remarketing. There are those awesome audience signals compared to like a standard shopping campaign. But I think you can contend it's not making the full use of Google's technology. You might dispute how valuable that technology is, or if Google really delivers on this kind of premise of matching users and inventory and intent and product perfectly, or if they're just kind of shuffling in some inventory, hotly disputed. But my big warning here is that this is not very future-proof. It's so unclear. I'm getting hot and cold signals all the time from Google, but a big warning sign to me is that recently we found out that like there are going to be assets generated out of the feed, more of these, that's going to enable YouTube Shorts, for example, which is a cool ad type. I don't have a really problem with YouTube Shorts, but if you're committed to feed only, it looks like on the horizon that's going to get slippery. The asset only approach, this is the opposite, where you have all assets in and you take away the feed. This was, I think, Menachem Ani called this kind of like a paid social style. I don't agree with that, but I get the idea, and because it should be more of like a demand gen campaign. I think that this approach is no longer needed because there are now demand gen campaigns coming out, which seem pretty cool so far. But you know what? Test it, try it, try it against a demand gen campaign, see what you think. My warnings about this and about demand gen too, these demand gen campaigns or these all asset PMax campaigns, it's not the same thing as paid social. People are not in the same headspace. The ad inventory is not comparable to someone's social feed. Yes, YouTube is awesome, but like throwing Gmail in there, I'm sorry, that's not the same thing. I don't believe it's the same thing. But I'm always willing to be proven wrong and let the data speak for itself. So I could be updating this opinion in a quarter's time or whatever. And I'm also worried big time, like, you know, if you're talking about paid social, let's talk about Advantage Plus shopping campaigns. You can control the amount of like new versus returning customers and stuff like that. And Google doesn't have that kind of control. And I see no guarantee that it's not going to just remarket the hell out of people. I don't have a guarantee of that. And that seems really counter to the point of demand gen. Excluding brand traffic. We talked about this earlier as a strategic hornet's nest. Now, there are, as I mentioned, new features from Google that kind of say, okay, we acknowledge that there is a desire from the market to do this. We get it. Here you go. Brand exclusions. And there are also some negative keywording possibilities if you know the way. And it can really be, you know, we were talking earlier about meaningful difference. Segment when it matters. I am a believer that brand traffic should be segmented from non-brand traffic. I do think they are different from the intent. They are different from the user journey. They are going to differ in terms of performance. You might want to budget that differently. You might want to have a clearer overview of what's happening, because meanwhile, you've also got your branded search campaigns, and you just want to understand what's happening. I think that's totally fair. But there are some potential drawbacks, like, are you restricting the data that PMax has to learn from? If you're doing this through negative keywording, you're going to need a fallback shopping campaign. This stuff can get complicated. Also, like with the brand exclusions, you depend on Google's understanding and Google's classification. You don't have that direct level of control. Product segmentation. I like product clustering. This is a tactic you might have heard of, like leaders and bleeders, or heroes and zombies, or ghost products, or like over-index versus under-index. There's a ton of free scripts and low-cost products out there that will allow you to like take a 4-box model, kind of like this volume and efficiency matrix, and try to segment products into the right box there. Now, I think if you're on a smaller budget, I think this can make sense, that approach. It's definitely a simple approach. So that's my big cautionary tale there. It's very simplistic. Like it's appealing, right? Because you see these two axes, volume and efficiency, and it kind of makes sense. But there are so many other dimensions that you might want to kind of evaluate a product according to. Like if you just add, I don't know, price attractiveness as kind of a third axis, you know, now you've got this cube instead of the square 4-box model. You've got another dimension there. And then you add like, okay, margin or profitability in there. We can't even imagine that in our minds. We can't visualize something more than a cube. And then you start adding lots and lots of dimensions, which are often merited. And I think you get how simplistic a 4-box model is. So it's something, you know, we can't think in these multi-dimensional ways that well. We can't think in these non-linear ways that well. We're really good at common sense and strategy that machines are not good at. But there is machine learning that can think better in those terms. And that's something, by the way, that, you know, we just tackle the problem by building machine learning that handles this, which, you know, this way you can have an unlimited number of dimensions, and then you're modeling product neighborhoods rather than creating like product clusters. One more thought is just like often these matrices, like I've seen one where it's like ROAS and conversion value. I'm sorry, ROAS and conversion value. It looks like I'm doing a dance, YMCA or something. And I don't like that idea of having ROAS and conversion rate held against each other, because you're pulling on the same string there. Actually, conversion rate is an important input to ROAS. So you're not even actually creating a two-dimensional segmentation. But what I really recommend though is that you have to test things, you know, just get into it. Take the time to think in combinations of features and tactics and campaign types. This stuff is all very combinatory, you know. So think about like, how could a brand search and a brand PMax interface with each other? And, you know, can I try out some of these newish bidding strategies, like new customer bidding, for example? Yeah, what if I use a feed-only PMax with a more advanced product segmentation? Or what if there's some things I'm assigning to standard shopping? I think a term we sometimes use, we think of like orchestrating these different campaign types and having just really a comprehensive, well-thought strategy where your campaign structure and your budgets and then your targets are really a manifestation of that strategy. And I've written there, test everything. So that brings us to, we're getting on in time here, so I'll keep it quick. Testing. Now, what we like to do regarding A/B tests here at SMec, Smarter E-commerce, is to use Google Match Markets. And by the way, if you haven't been to Google's GitHub repository lately, this is there. This lives there at the GitHub repository, and there's so many cool things there these days. There's like profit bidding. There's customer lifetime value. There's so much cool stuff over there. Go have a look. But yeah, you need to build a testing roadmap, because it's so easy to do testing wrong. It's so easy to draw wrong conclusions or have confounding variables. You need to really not test too many things at once. You need to just have everything in a structured, planned, organized manner. And yeah, I mean, I've got some things you want to consider there, but I want to get to the Q&A kind of. This is a QR code which will take you to Google Match Markets. And if you're not a programmer, there's a couple of other links in there which you can click when the deck is shared with you after. But they also have some, like in Collab, they have some other kind of resources. And I want to get in the Q&A, so we'll end it there for now. First off, thanks for listening so far. Really appreciate that. And there's another QR code. If you want to stay in touch, you can follow me on LinkedIn or connect, whatever, on LinkedIn. And you'll get to see lots of new data as I'm publishing it. And then I kind of want to have a look at the questions. So I see we've got some open questions. So, okay, the first, by the way, if I don't know the answer to a question, I'll tell you I don't know. Okay, let's just make a deal. All right. Like the first question, I work with nonprofits and have been wondering about PMax and how it can be used to drive donations for clients. That's a super cool project, by the way. They asked, have you tested non-retail based campaigns with PMax? To me, it's not my area. I'm sorry, I can't really help with that. Compared to the initial phase, PMax have transformed a bit from black box to shadow campaigns. Do you think that the changes already active and all the updates that have been scheduled have benefited from such an automated type of campaign? Or things like brand exclusion could damage that 360 mentality of PMax? Oh, and in Italy, they're still waiting for the search term update. Sorry to hear that hasn't rolled out yet. Thanks for mentioning that. But so in answer to this question, like, so Google is adding some controls to us and making some sort of concessions. And do I think that's damaging the 360 approach of PMax? Well, the philosophy of Google here is that they want to create, and I'll give a hat tip to Patrick Gilbert's book, Join or Die. He writes about this topic a lot. They want to create this very liquid environment for their algorithm to operate in. They want to knock down artificial constraints, artificial barriers. And, you know, we used to do, I mean, we still have bidding as well for standard shopping. It used to be our core product. And now we work on how we can help support people with PMax a little bit more. But our data scientists had the same kind of concerns. You know, they were also bothered by how often people were changing settings or putting up settings that were making the algorithm's job harder. And this is kind of a philosophical topic because I was product manager for that tool back then, by the way. And I think that if people make those changes, they have a reason why. And we have to respect that and kind of, you know, it's not their job to make life easy for our data scientists. It's our data scientists' job to make the product work as best as possible for these people. Now, Google, they've taken away a lot of options. It is what it is. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling here. I hope I'm not putting you to sleep. I think they would not add in anything that hurts that then. I think everything that gets added back is on Google's terms and works for Google. Like they focus on brand exclusions and not negative keywords. And that's because it's packaged in a way and delivered in a way that works for them. You know, the search term insights is different than the search term report. And it's delivered in a way that works for Google. So they're compromising, and I respect that. How would you measure the incrementality of PMax campaigns? Thanks for that question. Sorry, I really glossed over the testing thing at the end there, but there's different ways of approaching this. You can, and it depends on like your resources and stuff as well. You can use geosplits and do on-off testing, holdout testing. You can do marketing mix modeling, which will look at your overall channel mix and try to determine PMax's incrementality and value add in there without having to like do on-off testing. It uses Bayesian modeling, and that could be a non-invasive way. There's options like Robin from Meta. Google has a Python package on GitHub called Lightweight MMM, which works on this. And there's tools like Recast if you want a third party in there. You don't want to get involved with the platforms. There's all kinds of options. Yeah, and another thing, some people are looking at their marketing efficiency ratio, which is kind of the overall, it's like ROAS, but for all your channels and all your revenue, and trying to draw some conclusions there. So there's a lot of ways of approaching it. Hope that helps. How to set the right return on ad spend target for PMax? Simply, if you have no specific value from the client, should you simply leave the client with max conversion value? Yeah, I mean, ideally, your return on ad spend is a number that makes sense for your business and that you've thought about, and that's connected like with the CFO or blessed by the CFO or whatever. But it's a very tactical lever for pacing spend and pacing budget at the same time as it's a kind of a strategic target. So, and you know, I'm still working on this research, but I'm looking at the difference between max conversion value and having a ROAS target set. And there's not such a big difference actually, but it's too early to really talk about, but it's a great question. You know, it scares me to say just choose a ROAS or just don't use one, because you could kill their business if you don't have the right ROAS. Talk to them about it. You have to get something out of them. Another question on Performance Max versus standard shopping. Was brand included or excluded in PMax and standard shopping? Thank you for the question, Michael. The problem is right now, that's another thing. Like I recently started to segment on this feed versus feed only versus full build. That's a new capability. And I'm always working on these new capabilities for trying to segment further, understand the data further. I cannot right now do that. If you have a smart idea, we're connected, you can send me a message. But the problem is there are so many different ways that this brand non-brand thing could be handled, and I feel like it's not easy to flag. So I can't segment that right now. No, that's not considered in the analysis. Do you have any recommendations on reporting for PMax? There doesn't seem to be in-depth reporting for PMax currently. Do I know if and when more updates are coming to Google? I mentioned scripts earlier. There are some scripts that will help you understand the placement mix in a bit more detail, that make it easier to do asset group reporting, that make it easier to use your search term insights. So huge shout out to like Mike Rhodes in particular, but Jack Felstead, and Google them, check out their scripts, one of the better options out there. But there is stuff to be found. You have to have some curiosity. You need to set aside some time for it. I find that Auction Insights is one of my favorite reports right now for checking out with Performance Max. I didn't share any of that data today, but maybe another time. But no, Google, Google, they have their insights and they're improving them a bit, but they're not going to start reporting placement types anytime soon. I don't think so. Next question. What do you think will happen when X joins the display network? Yeah, that's coming up. Poor Elon, falling on hard times. I feel so bad for the guy. As an advertiser on Google Ads, I think you need to watch those placements carefully. I think there's going to be probably crap. There could be some crap performance coming out of that. As an X user or a Twitter user, I'm optimistic that I might start getting better ads. And so I think maybe it's going to meet somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's going to be anyone's top placement from a Google Ads perspective, but I think, the advertising is so bad on Twitter right now, it can only improve that situation. And yeah, but I don't know. I hope that answers your question well enough. What are your thoughts of doing a feed-only PMax and then using demand gen for all the rest of the assets? Yeah, I think that's going to be a pretty popular strategy. And it would be nice to get some clarity from Google, like, do they really support feed-only or not? Are they going to allow this in the future or not? Because we see like YouTube Shorts inventory is going to be coming to PMax with or without your assets. They're going to get it they're going to get what they need from the merchant center. And Shorts is a key part of demand gen. So I'm missing clarity from Google on this, but I think it's definitely a cool idea worth testing. Brand Performance Max, nice idea, but we use Google Merchant Center for new customer acquisition, and prices include discounts, which we can't offer to our customers. How can I use the same feed with different prices? I'm not 100% sure I understand this question, I guess, or maybe I'm not enough of a Merchant Center expert, but yeah, you got to be careful because you can get suspended for this kind of stuff. It's a good question. If you have different landing pages or different merchant centers or sub accounts, I can't really answer that question to the person who asked. I'm sorry about that. But you're anonymous. Write me your name and I can follow up with you after talking with the team. When is it okay to change URLs or assets on PMax? How long does it take for the campaign to learn? Yeah, we're studying right now how PMax responds to changes in return on ad spend targets. I wanted to include that in this presentation, but it's not quite ready yet. But in terms of changes to URLs and assets, I can't answer that question in really a data-based way. But I think that PMax does a pretty good job learning and being pretty adaptive, but I can't answer it better than that. Sorry. I'll see if someone on the team has an opinion, but again, you're anonymous. I won't bite. Send me your details if you want. How do you choose PMax for shopping? There are people who don't like PMax. They're not comfortable with it. It leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And shopping is not broken. I think I wrote that in one of my bullet points in there. Shopping is not broken. Shopping still works. So if you think that PMax is just going too heavily into remarketing, or too heavily, like if you feel like you can't control it enough, you're not comfortable with the placements, your assets are in no condition, shopping's still there. It's okay. It's okay to use shopping. So it's your personal comfort level, it's your strategy. But we're seeing good results with Performance Max at face value in platform. You know, maybe you find that it doesn't look as good in the back end. Hold on, sorry, I've got an awkward screen set up here. I have to like adjust this window a bit. Sorry about that. No, I can't really. Hold on. So what are the best practices to ensure that a PMax feed only will bring the most incremental sales? Well, yeah, I think this is why people get into brand exclusions, is to help kind of force the incrementality topic. The new customer only bidding mode is another way. I would not use new customer only values. I think that that's kind of a risky strategy. It's very confusing to the reporting, needlessly so, in my opinion. Yeah, you can also, there's other, to me, when I think of incrementality, there's other kinds there too, like your bestsellers. Is PMax just leaning hard into the bestsellers? And is that what you need? If you're really acquiring, you know, you can look at what products are associated with new customers and focus on it that way. Segment your products according to something like that. There's a number of ways to get into this. But yeah, I think a place to start is brand. You've already done a bit by excluding some of these other placements that are more likely perhaps to go into remarketing, but there's still going to be dynamic remarketing in your feed only campaign, and there's nothing that you can do about that. What is your take on adding micro conversions such as add to cart, begin checkout, in situations where there are fewer than 30 conversions in a month? Personally seeing good results. Okay, thanks for sharing that tip. I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with that, to be honest. From the theory, it makes sense. And I think you just have to make sure that the algorithm is not drawing the wrong conclusions in the end. You know, these micro conversions need to be tightly correlated as possible to actual conversions, so that you're really supporting the machine on learning the right message or the right audience and stuff like that. If you're getting too loose with that association between the micro conversion and the real conversion, you could teach it bad behavior. And that's just in theory. As I said, I don't personally, but that's my theoretical answer to that. What do you think about A/B testing with PMax? How much time do you think is necessary to validate the results, taking into account the learning time of smart bidding? Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I could probably do a whole webinar about testing. Maybe we will one day, or honestly, someone from our data team would be better, data science team would be better at that. But you need to have your pre-post in there, pre-period in there. You need to allow that it's ramped up. It's important to have a fair comparison. And honestly, usually the longer you test, the better. Of course, this can have trade-offs in terms of the overhead that goes into this, and maybe the test might be in a way limiting your performance, or you might feel that there's some risk to your budget associated with that. There's always an opportunity cost of testing. An alternative to this would be to use, like these kind of Bayesian tactics, like a marketing mix modeling, that is less invasive. But yeah, to be fair, you definitely need to put in the groundwork. But yeah, I'll try to provide more information to you in the future. I've got your name there. Would you trust PMax to pick up on short-term signals such as Black Friday, or would you push key product lines through standard shopping? Well, you'd hope and pray that Google understands what Black Friday is by now. Nevertheless, and I'm trying to be flippant towards, I don't know, no one here, but I would use your your seasonality adjustments just to be sure, just to make sure that it's going to push hard enough. And yeah, if you want to take manual control through standard shopping so that you have there are more promotional controls in standard shopping. That's the way it is. It's true. And you might find that you can push it harder. But ultimately, PMax is good at finding conversion value. So I would say PMax, but throw in some seasonality adjustments to make sure. We're at the hour here. There's still some, well, oh dear, there's a lot more questions. Oh my goodness. I'm kind of running out of time, to be honest. I'm so sorry, but I'm going to try to follow up with these, okay? I can only say thank you so much for joining. It was really great. Thank you for your engagement. I wish I'd have another hour to keep going through these questions. There's a ton. We've got like 34 questions. So that's too much for me for right now. I'm real sorry about that. But thanks again. And connect with me on LinkedIn. Message me anytime. I don't bite. And I'm wishing you a really successful Q4, by the way. Bye.